Welcome to Trudge the Road. It's sponsored by Caron Treatment Centers. Caron, a nonprofit leading provider of drug and alcohol addiction treatment with treatment facilities in Pennsylvania, Florida, Texas, offices in Bermuda, Boston, New York, Philadelphia, and Washington, D.C. They can be reached by calling 1-800-854-6023, or you can go to their website, caron.org. That's CARON.org. We're your hosts. I'm Rich, a recovered drug addict.
I'm a sober alcoholic called Jerry.
And I'll tell you, we have one heck of a show coming up, Jerry.
Ooh, mercy.
One heck of a show. We're very happy to have CONNER, former Miss U.S.A.
Miss U.S.A. 2006.
Is going to be joining us here behind these microphones. And Tara has, her story is pretty well known. You know, she was a Miss U.S.A. and then she fell victim to the disease that had been really haunting her most of her life. Mm-hmm. And she will be coming to share her story of how she, from the beginning all the way to where she is now, the miracle she is today.
It's a remarkable story from really her early childhood there in Nowheresville, Kentucky, all the way up becoming Miss USA to the downfall to where she is today. And it's a miraculous and exciting story to hear.
Yeah, very exciting. I myself just got back from the beach, spent some time at the Outer Banks this past week, and I got to tell you something. It was one of the most beautiful, spiritual, relaxing experiences I've ever had in my life.
I know, and you've been talking to me about it, and it's a wonderful story. You know, just to quote Reverend Jack from last week when he was talking about recovery being an epic journey, and, you know, made up of some little and some magnificent events in our lives, but recognizing that all of them really have a spiritual connection. And I think what you experienced at the Outer Banks was one of spiritual magnitude, really. To share a little bit about what it was like to be able to make that identification with God as you choose to understand Him from the perspective of, being of somebody who's a drug addict who's in recovery and, spending one day at a time trying to find the strength to be able to maintain some type of life.
Well, let me just tell you, the Outer Banks are in North Carolina. I was at Emerald Isle, which is South North Carolina. And you and I talk about these kind of things all the time, but there were many, many moments when I was sitting on the porch. I had a beach house, which was 30 yards from the water. And many, many times over this past week, I sat there staring at the water and thought to myself, how did I get here? How did I manage to get right here, to be able to enjoy all this, to see all of this, to take all this in, to breathe all this in? When you think about where I was 11 years ago, I didn't even have a bicycle to my name. I had nothing. I had snorted up every possession that I had, every friendship I had, every relationship that I had. I had absolutely nothing. I had a pair of shorts, a shirt, and some flip-flops, and that was it. And this, of course, was the tail end. This was my bottom after making some pretty good money through the years and having a very reliable job and basically throwing it all away for drugs. And here I am 11 years later, sitting on this porch in one of the most beautiful places anywhere in the world, staring at the ocean. And yeah, I thought, how did I get here?
I had the exact same experience. I shared it a little bit a couple of weeks ago when I was in Louisville, Kentucky. That's where I got sober, was in Louisville. And I was back for an event, and I was staying at the Galt House. And if you're familiar with Louisville, Kentucky, it's a beautiful, giant conference center right downtown. And those were the streets right downtown that I lived on. As a matter of fact, you looked down on Market Street. I used to call it the Market Street March, where I'd walk up and down Market Street trying to figure out, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? What am I going to do? And here I was in this beautiful hotel looking down on the streets that I used to live in, and I asked myself the exact same question. How did I get here? It's not that, you look how far I've come. We don't look at it that way at all. It's just almost a mystery. And the mystery of the fact is it's that miracle. It's that spiritual connection that we made that provided us to get to another place so that we could be of service to others.
Well, I'll tell you something, and I told you this off here. When I first got there, our very first night, last Saturday, we had gotten our stuff down, and then we had some dinner and stuff, and then Fran, my wife, said, let's go down to the beach. Let's go down to the water. And this is about 11 o'clock at night, so it's kind of dark down there, but the waves are rushing in. It was a bit windy when we had got there, too, so the waves were a little bit bigger than normal. And as we walked down there, I was overcome with a feeling that I can't really even describe, but it took my breath away. We stood near the edge of the water, and it was dark, but these waves are rushing in. I had a whole week ahead of me, And once again, reflective, grateful, appreciative that I am here. And again, with that, how did I get here thing? But as the waves crashed in front of me and the water rushed up over my shins, and trailed behind me, I was just so overwhelmed. It was such a spiritual experience.
That's what it was.
It was. It just, I never felt anything so powerful as I stood there. And I think, I don't know whether it was the salt water or what, but tears in my eyes. My God, how did I get here? And all of the stress that I had from the previous weeks, I got a lot going on right now, it just kind of washed out of me. And it was just... and I had my wife with me, this girl that I've loved since I was 16 years old, and just everything all at one time. It was very, very powerful.
It is. See, it's an appreciation, an emotional appreciation combined with the fact that now you can appreciate all of your senses. You could smell that ocean. You could taste that salt. You could see the stars. All of those things that just leave us when we're in our cups, when we're drinking and when we're drugging. We don't see any of that. We don't feel any of that. So when it comes back magnified, and that is a spiritual experience. And just the way you were able to articulate that, I was able to identify with God as I choose to understand him. And in his way of letting you know, I'm here. I'm here. I want you to rest now. I want you to be happy. You're doing something for the family business. You're working for me. You're doing something for another alcoholic there on earth. And that is the way he communicates to us. And what kind of communication is that? That's love. That's tranquility. That's peace. All of the things that we tried to find in a bottle or in a syringe or in a pill or in a smoke, there it is, handed to you. But again, see, it's that spiritual connection.
Well, I think you made a good point, too, when you said, these are things that we didn't see when we were out there. I didn't see these kind of things. And let me just tell you, Emerald Isle is not a place where you go and there's a boardwalk and there's all kinds of crazy activity going on. This is a place you go where there's really nothing but the water. And it's an off week, so, it's off-peak season, so there's very few people there. And those that are there are mostly adults. There's not a big banging bar down the street, or you're going. I didn't think about anything but that water in front of me and the stars in the sky. Yes. Let me tell you something, because it is not a busy, well-lit isle, it's very dark there. And so the stars were just incredible. And it's off the coast of Carolina, so it's not connected really to North Carolina. So you're kind of out a little bit.
You're on a big sand pile.
I'm telling you something, man. Those stars out there. But my point to talking about all this is the fact that I could have never imagined 11 years ago that I would be sitting here with this woman in this environment, looking at the things I'm looking at and appreciating the things the way that I appreciated them. I was just trying to survive into next week 11 years ago. I didn't have any concept that my life would go to this. So the point that I'm really making here is that it is so possible for anybody that might be out there right now that is struggling and thinking, my God, I can't go on another day. My God, there's nothing ahead of me. The only thing I can think about is my next deal, or what time the bar opens, or can I get a six-pack after 2 o'clock by convincing the clerk to sell it to me. There is so much more out there, and I'm so much more happier than I could have ever imagined. And it is possible. Anybody. It is very, very possible for you to experience what I experienced as well.
Use that as motivation to follow us in our journey. And our journey is to find a path of living which gives us a plan of rational behavior. We call them the 12 steps, and they work. And if there isn't any more proof than that, you've articulated it best. That's what sobriety is. It's the functioning of all of your senses. It's the functioning of all of your feelings inside, the positiveness, the opportunity to be so grateful and appreciate everything around you. All the things that this disease will rob you from until you find this path. And this simple path, these 12 steps, will provide you what Rich just gave us. And thank you very much for that spiritual experience.
Well, this is Trudge the Road. It's sponsored by Caron Treatment Centers. Caron, a nonprofit leading provider of drug and alcohol addiction treatment. Caron specializes in men's and women's services, as well as young adult males and females, plus plus a relapse program and outpatient services. If you're concerned about yourself or a loved one, call 1-800-854-6023. Or you can go to their website, Caron.org. That's CARON.org. This is the Trudge the Road radio program. And coming up, we're going to talk to CONNER in just a little bit, former Miss U.S.A. For Jerry, I'm Rich. This is Trudge the Road.
You're listening to Trudge the Road. Coming up, Rich and Jerry continue their discussion on hope and how when you feel life can't get any better, it can. That's next on the Trudge the Road Radio Network.
There is a new phase of recovery, and you see it in the pages of Renew Magazine and at RenewEveryday.com. Renew and RenewEveryday.com are changing the face of recovery for good. Each issue is filled with positive role models, life-affirming stories, encouragement, and ideas to help any life in recovery. Whether you're already enjoying an addiction-free life, have a loved one facing his challenges, or are considering recovery, Renew and RenewEveryday.com can support and inspire you. Join us. Check out RenewEveryday.com to learn more.
Welcome back to Trudge the Road. It's sponsored by Caron Treatment Centers. Caron, a nonprofit leading provider of drug and alcohol addiction treatment with treatment facilities in Pennsylvania, Florida, Texas, and offices in Bermuda, Boston, New York, Philadelphia, and the nation's capital. They can be reached by calling 1-800-854-6023, or you can go to their website, Caron.org. That's CARON.org. We're your hosts. I'm Rich, a recovered drug addict.
Call me Jerry. I'm a sober alcoholic.
Jerry, why do we do this show?
It's for people who suffer from the disease of addiction to alcohol and drugs. And family members, you're every bit as important. We know how tremendously you suffer. We know you have questions. Our goal here, provide some answers, and ultimately, with God's good grace, offer some solutions to this dilemma.
If you'd like to catch prior shows, we have a YouTube channel, youtube.com/Trudge the Road Radio. Quite a few up there. Also, Facebook. Just type Trudge the Road Radio in your search engine, and that will come up. And also Twitter, twitter.com/TTR show. And of course, we have the website as well. See, that's the thing. We got all these things going. recoveryforlifechannel.com. In the first segment, we talked a little bit about my trip down to the Outer Banks of North Kakalaki, as you like to call it.
Too much,
I know. I kept saying that all the whole time. Fran just kept looking at me, why you keep saying that? I don't know. That's what Jerry calls it. So,
absolutely.
It was a beautiful experience. It was a spiritual experience. It was one of those things where I have to step back and say, I cannot believe that me is here. And because, my life did not lead me down a path that it felt like it could ever be possible to be here. But the truth is that it was possible. And that was the whole point of the first segment, is that no matter what you're dealing with and whatever your situation is, there is hope. There is hope and solution out there awaiting for you. And it's part of this 12-step program.
Just, that's what kind of frustrates me to a certain degree. Is a couple of weeks ago, I was going to speak at a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I had to park my car in an underground garage. And as I walked out of this garage going over to where this church was, I had to walk over a number of men and women who were suffering from this disease, sitting there, lying there, unconscious, barely conscious, and I have the solution. I have the solution. They're just not willing to accept it, and that can be really frustrating, because that was me, as you know. I sat on that very park bench in that exact condition, and just was unwilling to be able to follow 12 simple principles that are a guideline, basically, to rational behavior. Everything else, I was willing to change anything but drinking. I'll change you, I'll change jobs, I'll change geography, but I won't change the drinking. And that, of course, ultimately was what I had to do. It was, if you'd act right, I'd quit drinking. That was always the case. Blaming people, places, and things for my behavior, not realizing that I was suffering from a disease. And I gave you the example. You were just at the Outer Banks. I used to think the Outer Banks got me drunk.
Yeah?
I lived in eastern North Carolina, married to Don at the time, and her daddy had a beach house down there, cottage, that we used to, be able to use periodically. And if I found out 2 weeks in advance that we're going down there, it would start crossing my mind. I know that the Outer Banks gets me drunk. The Outer Banks doesn't get me drunk. Jared gets me drunk. And what I didn't realize is that relapse had occurred those 2 weeks before I ever went down there, because it was all about my thinking. Now I'm anticipating. this is going to happen. And I drive down there from Eastern Carolina, those of you familiar with the area, down old 158 through, Jackson and all those little farming communities through that area. And I would drive all the way around those little towns so I wouldn't have to go down Main Street and see that state store. But what I didn't realize is the only thing that had not taken place was the financial transaction with me at the liquor store at the Outer Banks,
right.
Because I'd already made that decision. And blaming the Outer Banks for me getting drunk, blaming Donna for me being drunk. People, places, and things I would blame and be able to articulate with some kind of sense that you might even believe me that you're at fault for the way I'm acting.
Do you know how ridiculous that sounds? I mean, really, when you were down there and you were drunk and somebody called you out on it, did you really throw that up? Hey, man, it's not my fault. It's the Outer Banks' fault.
I wouldn't do that much, but that would stay in my head. But it would be your fault. Donna, I wouldn't be drunk right now if you weren't such a bear. If you weren't so mean.
I want to go down there and I want to have a good time, but I can't do it because you are so impossible to deal with. The only way I can deal with you and have a good time, since we took all this time to come down here, is for me to be drunk.
Were you there?
No, but I've done the same things in the past.
We all do. That's just part of the pathology of the disease, blaming people, places, and things for our problems. And it's a disease. People who have kidney disease, they don't blame a bad childhood for it. And you don't blame alcoholism on a bad childhood. If you have the disease, you have the disease. And it's an awful disease. It's awful. But there is a solution. And we're living proof of that solution by joining an organization that uses the 12 steps to provide us a rational way to behave for the rest of our lives and to take out the emotion of it. That's how we function. We only function on how we felt, never on how we thought. I'm angry. I'm sad. I'm upset. What am I going to do about that? Or I'm happy. I'm glad. What am I going to do about that? It's always the same answer. I'm going to drink. I'm going to drink to either feel better, feel well, whatever. It never stops, and that cycle just continues and continues and continues till you find that you've just wrapped yourself around three emotions. You're functioning off of three feelings: elation, anxiety, and despair. I've got booze. I'm feeling good. The booze is running out. I'm getting the anxiety. The booze is gone. Total despair. I've got to get more. I've got to have that level of elation coming back. When I was years and years ago living in the back seat of an old broken down Mercury behind the Ice House recovery center, behind the Ice House AA Clubhouse in Louisville, Kentucky, with it raining, freezing, coming off of the alcohol. You know what I wanted at that point? You know what I really wanted? I wanted another drink. That's how insane we become. It becomes the solution to all of our problems, even when we're in that level of disparity. And you don't physically have to be there. Tara and I are going to talk a lot about that, as a matter of fact.
Okay. But, just to relate to your Ice House story, I can tell you back in 2000, I went to jail. And I went to jail because I had drugs in my pocket. And when I got out of jail, the whole time I was in jail, I talked about how when I got out of jail, I was going to go out and get high again. Even though here I am, now I've got no place to live. I've got no girlfriend. I've got no car. I've got no job. I've got no money. But all because of this addiction. But yet all I could talk about was when I got out, how I was going to go right back to do it. Even though I was in the county jail for 10 days, plenty of time to get well, at least, get detox out of my system. But yet I talked, and that's what I did. I got out of jail and I actually walked 4 miles all the way back home looking for drugs. Couldn't find it. Walked another 2 miles up the road looking for drugs, and I finally found it. How crazy is that?
That's the insidiousness of this disease. That is crazy. That's absolutely insane behavior, but that is where it takes us to do those things of such extreme self-damage and expecting better results the next time. This time it's going to be better. This time it's going to be better. This time it's going to be better. And each time it just gets worse and worse and worse and worse till the consequences can be as far as death.
Well, I'll tell you, consequences are something that Tara CONNER, former Miss U.S.A., knows a lot about. I mean, she has lived a very compelling life in her short time here on Earth, and a lot of it filled with addiction. But she also has a great story of how she came out the other side. Tara CONNER, Miss USA, right here with Jerry and myself. That is coming up on Trudge the Road. Trudge the Road, sponsored by Caron Treatment Centers. Caron, a nonprofit leading provider of drug and alcohol addiction treatment. Caron specializes in men's and women's services as well as young adult males and females, plus a relapse program and outpatient services. If you're concerned about yourself or a loved one, call 1-800-854-6023, or you can go to their website, Caron.org. That's CARON.org. Tara CONNER up next. This is Trudge the Road on the Trudge the Road Radio Network.
You're listening to Trudge the Road. Coming up, Jerry sits down with former Miss U.S.A, Tara Connor. It's next on the Trudge the Road Radio Network.
There is a new phase of recovery, and you see it in the pages of Renew Magazine and at RenewEveryday.com. Renew and RenewEveryday.com are changing the face of recovery for good. Each issue is filled with positive role models, life-affirming stories, encouragement, and ideas to help any life in recovery. Whether you're already enjoying an addiction-free life, have a loved one facing his challenges, or are considering recovery, Renew and RenewEveryday.com can support and inspire you. Join us. Check out RenewEveryday.com to learn more.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Trudge the Road. This is a radio program which is dedicated to people who suffer from the disease of addiction to alcohol and drugs, as well as your family and your friends. We know that you suffered tremendously, and we know you have a lot of questions. And that's what this program is all about, to answer some of those questions. And as we always say, hopefully with God's good grace, bring some solutions to this incredible dilemma. Now, Trudge the Road is brought to you by Caron Treatment Centers, a nonprofit leading provider of drug and alcohol addiction treatment, with treatment facilities in Pennsylvania, Florida, and Texas, and offices in Bermuda, Boston, New York, Philadelphia, and the nation's capital. They can be reached by calling 800-854-6023 or by going to their website, caron.org. That's CARON.org. And we have a celebrity with us today, and we're very honored that you would give us a little bit of your time. Tara Connor, Miss U.S.A, is here with us. How are you, Tara?
I'm wonderful. I'm so happy to be here.
How's your mom? I know your mom better than you. Is she all right?
How do you know my mom better than me? Did you meet her?
A number of times. We've actually been at a number of speaking of occasions where you were speaking.
And my mom was there.
And she was there. Yeah.
Always bringing mom along.
Well, she's a very cool lady.
She's such a sweet person. She just went to Breakthrough recently.
Did she really?
She did.
All right. We're going to talk a little bit about Breakthrough coming up here, but thank you for being here. Your story, of course, is known across the United States, and it's one of triumph now. It's been, what now, 6 years? How long has it been?
5.5. Over 5.5.
Over 5.5 years. Tell us a little bit about what it was like there. You were in Nowheresville, Kentucky, and then all of a sudden you're Miss USA, and in between that A and that Z, there was a childhood that kind of went by the wayside, if I'm not mistaken. Just give us a little about so we can kind of get to know, what happened.
Well, I think what happened was... I felt like I was an addict from out of the womb. I mean, I always had this really deep sense that no one understood me. I always felt extremely different, never felt a part of. No matter how hard I tried to acclimate to a group or a set of friends, I knew zero boundaries with the different groups in school. So I was kind of a floater, and, alcoholism runs in my family. So I always knew that something was off in my family, and I'd never had a drink, but I always felt like I had to lie about everything because I always felt like I was in trouble. Or I felt like, it was strange. 5 years old, I'm not pretty enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not good enough, I'm scared of everything. What am I going to be when I grow up? Do they really love me? If I were to die, would anyone care? 5 years old, I had thoughts like that.
You are describing the disease of alcohol, disease of addiction. Yeah.
Absolutely.
It rears its ugly head way before we ever take a drink or a drug.
Yeah, and I think that's why my disease progressed so quickly. I had my first drink on a cheerleading trip when I was 14, and by the end of that year, I was doing morphine.
Wow, that's quite a little journey.
And so, throughout that, life would happen, and obviously when we drink and use, we put ourselves in tricky situations, and I experienced a lot of hardships, and I really do feel like at the time my parents were kind of like kids raising kids. My mom had really great intentions, but she was living with, someone with alcoholism, and she just didn't know what to do. So she was the peacekeeper. She was the one that tried to hold the family together. There was love there. There just wasn't communication there because everything was always brushed under the rug. And, it was...
atypical in an alcoholic household.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's really hard to grow up with that because why be honest if you think you're going to get in trouble for being honest? And why open up when no one's going to listen? Or at least that's how I felt. I'm sure that looking back, if I would have went to my mother and said, hey, Mom, yes, I'm extremely depressed and angry and I punch walls and sometimes I'm moody and when I wake up, I grow devil horns and a tail. It could be because of this, but, alcoholism is a disease that acts like you don't have it.
Right.
It convinces you, I don't have a problem. It's a sense of delusion that I lived with for years, and I never once connected the dots because I didn't know.
You don't know, but very few people do. Let me go back to the first time that it worked, and I think that that's very significant for those of us who suffer from this disease because we react differently. In other words, in my own case, when I had that first real experience at 12, 13 years of age, I got okay. All of a sudden everything was all right.
Yeah,
I could cope. I could be part of. It was wonderful. Did you have that kind of a reaction?
Absolutely, because I was put on the high school cheerleading squad right when I got into middle school. Wow. And our middle school was literally spitting distance from the high school. So after school every day I would walk over and I'm on the varsity team and it's co-ed and I'm the little nugget that they're throwing up in the air and I could do all the tricks. And I was the first girl to ever do that. So a lot of the seniors didn't like me. A lot of the juniors didn't like me because I gained their position a lot faster than they did and they didn't understand. They hated me. So we go on a school trip to Gatlinburg, Tennessee, and my cheerleading coach was when she would sleep, she would saw logs, so she snored extremely loud. So we knew that there were college boys staying right beside her, and we could sneak underneath her window. And the girls were like, "We're going to score some alcohol." And at this point, I had never had alcohol, but I thought, if I drink with these girls, then maybe they'll accept me. Maybe they'll think, maybe they won't treat me like the little kid. They'll treat me like an adult because I'm already in a high school situation and I'm just out of elementary school. And so, I did it. I mixed my first drink and I was like, I've got this, guys. Like, I know exactly what I'm doing because I have alcoholism in my family. I've seen this done before. So 75% vodka, 25% orange juice, and I chugged it in 5 minutes. And, just like I had seen before, 5 minutes later, 25% orange juice, 75% vodka. And I hit the floor. And I will say, because I looked at the girls and I was like, when is this supposed to kick in? And then I stand up and I fall over onto the bed. And then I go to make a deposit to the porcelain gods. My friend hands me what I think is water, and it's a wine cooler. But I had so much fun. Like, they were laughing probably at me, but I felt like they were laughing with me. And it just got crazy in there. Like, people were crying, like girls were hormonal, add a little bit of alcohol on top of that. It was a mess. It was an absolute mess. But I felt like it was so normal and it was so fun. And I did it. And I'd arrived, and it was funny. Like, the next day I still was a little drunk and I had vodka coming out of my pores. And as I said, I'm the nugget that they throw in the air. And I was like, rah, this sucks. Like, I hate the way I feel. I just want to throw up and I feel so green. And she's got to know, like, my cheerleading coach has to know that I drank last night because I can smell it. So God knows she can smell it. And I remember making my first pact with God, even though it was the most amazing experience. I had a lot of fun, but there was more bad than there was good. And I could recognize that there was more bad than there was good. And I said, God, if you just take this feeling away and get me through this, I'll never touch it again. I'll never touch it again. And by the end of that year, I was a dumpster.
Right. You know what God says when we make those prayers, we'll never do that again? You know what he does?
Tell me.
He goes, laughs at that one. We've all done that.
Oh, absolutely. And I always had a really hard time with God because I grew up in the Bible Belt and I was a child of abuse and I was always taught that if you drink on the weekends and then go to church on Sunday, you're going to hell. If you curse, you're going to hell. If you have premarital sex, you're going to hell. And I was like, I'm doomed. Because everyone was very judgmental and I was just like, well, God's never going to love me. So the only way that I knew how to pray was when I was in a pickle.
Sure.
And I'd be like, God,
please help me.
Please take this feeling away. I hate it.
Yeah. And I think a lot of us arrive at prayer that way. That's most of us, our introduction is the desperation type. So basically, you're playing a role in life. And however it may be it family, be it around other cheerleaders, be in school, you adapt to whatever you're, the chameleon, if you will.
Absolutely.
So, you progress on and through high school. Are you anticipating at this time, or do you have goals set to achieve this incredible title of Miss U.S.A.?
I think when I was like 7 years old, my mom and I used to watch Miss U.S.A. like it was a football game, and we would cheer on Kentucky. And Kentucky never won. Like, she would get close, or she would get in the top 10, and I just looked at her and was like, Mom, and I'm 7, like maybe younger than that. I'm like, one day I'm going to be Miss U.S.A. and I'm going to be the first girl from Kentucky to ever win it. And this was before I even got into pageants. We just watched it. It was a sport. It was awesome. And so when I competed for my first pageant, I don't think that I had been using yet, because the longer you stay sober, the more clarity you have in your actual story. And I did my first pageant, like my first real pageant when I was 13. And and it was great. You know, I was a tomboy and I used to ride four-wheelers and play basketball, but I was a cheerleader, but I still did a lot of boy things. And I was just a tomboy. But when I competed, all of the girls were like really catty. Like in the South, they are bred for these things. Like,
I know.
they live it, they breathe it. It's a religion. Like they handle their scandal and they know exactly what they're doing, and they're catty. And I was like, nah. So I would ask the girls, I'm like, they would come up to me and they'd be like, are you nervous? And I'm like, yeah, like this is nerve-wracking. I don't like this. And they would be like, I would say, are you nervous? And they're like, no. And so I ended up winning like that first pageant, and I was on the front page of the newspapers, and they were saying, look how beautiful she is, look how smart she is, look how great of a student she is, and she's on the varsity cheerleading squad. Like, it put me up on a pedestal, and I was like, huh. And I used that to my advantage. I never really thought to myself, like, someday I'm going to compete for Miss USA and I'm going to win Miss USA, because I never thought that I would be lucky enough to be plucked out of Russell County, which I thought was my problem, and my family, which I thought was my problem.
Sure.
And I would get in trouble in school, and then I would be like, I know what to do. I'm going to compete for a pageant. And if I win, look how pretty she is. Look how smart she is. I'm up on that pedestal. There's no way that I can be a bad kid. So it was just my mask. Yeah, that was my motivation.
Wow.
I never prepped for them. I never, I would throw on a dress that I would borrow from someone, and I just really didn't care. Like, I didn't care about myself enough to win a pageant, but I would just go in and I would be myself, and it was extremely authentic to the judges who were used to dealing with these girls that were bred to be Miss Americas and Miss USAs, and I was refreshing. And so, and I would sound like an idiot half the time because I was such a tomboy. Like, I wasn't built for this, but they loved it. And so I would win, and then all of a sudden, like, look how pretty she is, look how smart she is. So after a while, like, it just served me extremely well.
How did you hide the use?
I was very much a functioning addict.
Mm-hmm.
I used to say that my mom's never seen me drunk, but that's a lie. I tell myself all the time, because as I said, the more you stay sober, the more clarity you have on it.
Right.
And I got drunk in my freshman year in detention and had to be taken out of detention. They almost arrested me, but they didn't arrest me. They just let my mom take me home. And she was like, what's going on? And I was like, I'm depressed and blah. So she just thought it was a situational thing. And I was also busted my sophomore year with a prescription drug in my purse. And I'm so good at manipulating. I convinced my mom that it wasn't mine, and I was set up. So, but
she wanted to believe that.
She wanted to believe that, because how could her daughter be into such horrible things, And I had this theory that if I had my mom convinced that everything about me was okay, then I was convinced that I was okay. Like, that one person to convince, and that's how I live my life. But there were signs there. She just didn't know what to look for.
And a lot of parents don't.
Right.
We're not trained in it. It doesn't come in the manual. All right, I'll tell you what. We got to take a little break. We're going to come back. We're going to find out about what it was like to become Miss USA, the tragedy that ensued, and the miracle that came from that.
Okay.
So stay tuned. That is Tara Conner. This is Trudge the Road, and it is sponsored by Caron Treatment Centers. Caron is a nonprofit leading provider of drug and alcohol addiction treatment. Caron specializes in men's and women's services, as well as young adult males and females, plus a relapse program and outpatient services. So listen, if you are concerned about yourself or a loved one, waste no time. Call them at 800-854-6023 or go to their website, which is caron.org. That's CARON.org. We'll be back with Tara and more on Trudge the Road from the Trudge the Road Radio Network.
You're listening to Trudge the Road. Coming up, Jerry continues his discussion with former Miss USA, Tara Conner. It's next on the Trudge the Road Radio Network.
There is a new phase of recovery, and you see it in the pages of Renew Magazine and at RenewEveryday.com. Renew and RenewEveryday.com are changing the face of recovery for good. Each issue is filled with positive role models, life-affirming stories, encouragement, and ideas to help any life in recovery. Whether you're already enjoying an addiction-free life, have a loved one facing his challenges, or are considering recovery, Renew and RenewEveryday.com can support and inspire you. Join us. Check out RenewEveryday.com to learn more.
everybody. Welcome back to Trudge the Road, a radio program dedicated to people who suffer from the disease of addiction to alcohol and drugs. And if you're a family member, you have somebody who's suffering from this disease, we know what you're going through. We know you have a lot of questions. We hope to be able to provide some answers for you as well as the addicted person. Family and friends, you suffer greatly, and we know it. And ultimately, with God's good grace, hopefully we'll be able to bring some solutions to the dilemma that we face with this awful disease. Trudge the Road brought to you by Caron Treatment Centers, a nonprofit leading provider of drug and alcohol addiction treatment. Now, they've got treatment facilities in Pennsylvania, in Florida, and in Texas, as well as offices in Bermuda, Boston, New York, Philadelphia, and D.C. You can reach them by calling 800-854-6023. I suggest go to their website, caron.org. That's CARON.org. Tara Connor is back with us. Tara Connor, of course, Miss U.S.A. And thank you very much for giving us some time. I really do appreciate that. That's awfully kind of you.
No, I'm so happy to be
We don't
here.
get celebrities of your stature very often.
Oh, stop it. My head's going to be so big I won't be able to walk out of here.
Listen, no, you know, that's one thing you've got your head about you, and I respect that. You're a good kid, you know, and to me you still are. Before Miss U.S.A., before you become Miss U.S.A., you're Miss Kentucky now. Mm-hmm. You're living the life. You're living the dream. And really, you are living a dream because you just seem to be playing a role as to whatever situation that you're involved in. This had to be unbelievably stressful.
It was stressful because generally when you compete in a pageant, you have your application process and you put down all of the great do-gooder stuff that you do and you know what you're studying for and what you want to be when you grow up. And basically, like, I just did the bare minimum to be what they thought would look good. Like, I never really knew who I was, so I would just fake my goals and you know, my political views and all of these things. I had no idea what I stood for because I was just a shell. So I was just like, oh, this makes people happy when I say this, so I'll say this, you know. And I want to say that when I competed for Miss Kentucky, my disease was in full session. And I think a lot of people feel like, oh, she won Miss U.S.A. and moved to New York, and New York got the best of her. But I did more drugs in Kentucky than New York had ever
really?
wished to do, you know. And when I went to go compete for Miss U.S.A., I kind of looked at the pageant as a little bit of the joke because I was the class clown. I was the shortest girl in the pageant, and I, you know, had horrible grammar at the time, and sometimes I still do, and I had a really thick Southern accent, and no one was threatened by me. Like, no one was scared that I was going to come in and do anything. So my big goal was, okay, I just want to get first runner-up because that's the best Kentucky has ever done was second runner-up. So if I get first runner-up, then I'm making history, you know. So I'm going through the process of competing in the pageant. I'm doing drugs every day. I was having doctors ship me Vicodin because I had a toothache. You know, I was just constantly numbed out, and I wasn't present for that experience. And I feel like when you're a drug addict or you have a nose for seeking out other drug addicts, and it's like a radar. It's like, you have drugs, you know. So the day of the pageant, where there was 5 hours before we actually went on stage for the live telecast, and I found one of the girls, and she offered me a Xanax, and I took a Xanax and took a nap. I was like, I'll just take a nap before we get this party started. Wow. And so, you know, throughout the pageant, I was just kind of there. You know, I had no fear. I was going through the motions, and I answered my question horribly, but for some reason the judges really liked me. And I remember standing up there, and they called second runner-up, and it wasn't me, and it was between California and myself. And I was like, holy crap, like, I got first runner-up. This is awesome, you know? and I never once in my mind thought, I'm getting ready to move to New York, and my life's going to change. Like, it never crossed my mind. Really? I was just like, yes, first runner-up, you know? And I even congratulated Miss California. I was like, you're going to do so well at Miss Universe, and you're going to have such a great year, and you're so deserving. Like, good for you. And she's like, thank you. And then they ended up calling my name for winning Miss U.S.A. And I was just like, well, what? Like, it took me a second to realize what had happened. And of course, I'm numbed out, so I have no idea what's going on. I can't cry because there are no tears, you know? So I just cover my face, and I get this really surprised expression, and I'm just like, I think this is what I'm supposed to do. And, you know, I take my walk, and I'm waving, and I'm like, holy crap, what now? You know, because I knew. I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm getting ready to move to New York. I don't know what a cross street is. I don't know how to hail a cab. I lied on my application about most of the great things that were on there. oh no,
Oh my God.
So, and there was a lot of pressure in it because there were so many people in Kentucky. Even when I first started competing, they just knew, for some reason, they had so much faith that one day I would be the girl that could win Miss USA.
That is just remarkable. I just can't imagine what was going through your head when that happened. What did you do afterwards? You've been named Miss USA. I mean, you're all over every television network, every newspaper. What did you do?
Right after the pageant, they take you off the stage and they move you to a suite in the hotel, and you have one last night with your family and your friends. And they had a bottle of champagne and strawberries, and there are pictures of me holding up the bottle in celebration, like, that's right, we did it. And I think I drank most of it, if I'm not mistaken. I had to be up super early the next morning, and as I was packing my bag to get ready to check out of the hotel and leave, I realized I was leaving my mom. And my mom was my greatest enabler. She was my, my best friend, and we were kind of like Thelma and Louise. Like it was just us against the world.
Right.
And all of a sudden I didn't have her to please anymore. It was pleasing an organization of 20 people that look over your shoulder constantly and try to build you into this person that they want you to be. And you're a robot. You're a product of the Miss Universe organization. So I had to be on, like, it wasn't just compete for 3 hours and you're done. It was on 24/7, 7 days a week. And it was the hardest job I ever had. We would get faxes that would come through our fax machine. It was almost like Charlie's Angels, like every night. And then you'd read it. It's like, up at 5 a.m., eat breakfast by 5:15, take a shower, jump in a cab, go to this address, stay there for 3 hours, do this, jump on a plane, go here. And sometimes the days could be 15 hours long. Sometimes the days would just be 10 hours long, but it was every single day. And I didn't have the tools. I wasn't equipped for the job. So I was extremely lonely. It was the first time that I felt completely alone.
And your mother's not there. And
Mom's not there.
Obviously, because of this disease, your life skills are at minimum at best. And you're thrust into the national spotlight. Donald Trump comes into your life. And here's this pressure, this magnificent thing that has happened to you that you can't even comprehend, no less be able to live in.
Right.
What blew?
I was exhausted. I mean, that's the best way that I can put it. I was exhausted, I was tired, and I just wanted to give up. And I got a case of the I don't cares. I'll say it nicely.
We've had those. Yeah. We don't call them I don't cares either.
No, but we're being nice here.
Politically correct.
Yes, absolutely. And, people started sniffing out my behavior. When I would work for 10 hours and I didn't have a friend in sight, I would go to the club and I was able to get in. I was 20 years old. I was underage, but people would let me come in the back door because underage or not, people want you in their clubs.
You're Miss U.S.A.
Exactly.
Right.
And so I would go to the club and I would stay there, and I was really good at what I did. Like, I would get home at like 4 a.m., but I would go up the service elevator because I knew that the cameras couldn't see me come into the building.
Clever.
And I did this all the time, so I got extremely sick. My body was completely worn out, and I was tired. Right. And I was alone, and it got really dark. It got really bleak. And they
really scary.
Really scary. And it didn't help that, if they would have told me you're the most wonderful person in the world, it would have made me feel too much pressure. But they gave me a grammar coach, and I actually had a teacher to try to teach me grammar. So that, played in on my insecurity. You're not smart enough. Mm-hmm. They would take pictures of me and they're like, you're too skinny, or your skin looks yellow. I'm not pretty enough. And I would do interviews, and every time I would come off stage because I would say something that was grammatically incorrect, or I sounded like a quote unquote redneck. I wasn't a redneck. I was just from Kentucky. Like, right. We just have a lax way of speaking there. And, you're not witty enough. You're never going to be good enough. I was never going to be good enough for these people. And it wasn't that's what they were saying to me. They were trying to give me the tools, but I was in a place where I was just like, you're validating every insecurity that I have about myself. And so it just got really bad. I was done. I was so done, and I would lie through my teeth. They were like, something's wrong with this girl. We don't know what it is, but they never, I'm sure that I was high in front of them, but they could never point out like, you're high right now,
right,
know? And if I went out with them, I was always a lady, or I would try to be.
Sure.
And I just never wanted to give them the proper ammunition.
Just let me describe the pressure cooker syndrome. You know what a pressure cooker is? The thing on top that lets off a little steam. It sounds like that was kind of what was going on in your life. There'd be little pits of steam you could get off. You could get through this, get through that. But as we all know, if the heat gets too hot underneath a pressure cooker, bang, the top do come off. And,
yes,
it did come off, as it did in everybody in this room's case. We all blew the top, and there were terrible consequences that followed.
Right, absolutely. I eventually pissed off the right person, and my roommate suspected that I was doing drugs, and she told on me, and she ratted me out. And most people don't like rats, but that little rat saved my life, let's be honest.
Exactly.
And it was interesting. I didn't know for sure that she was actually going to tell on me the night that she threatened to, but the night before I got a drug test, I for some reason popped in a video of the pageant, and I was watching the pageant. I looked at all of the girls' faces when they didn't get called to the top 10 and the top 5, and they were devastated because they had worked their entire life to have my job.
Right.
And I hated my job. I hated the people that I worked for. I hated myself. I hated everything. And they were great people. I just hated them, because they wanted, because I wasn't good enough. I took it out on them. And I just felt like a jerk. And I finally cried. I hadn't cried in like 6 months. I finally was able to just let it out. And I felt remorse for the first time in a long time. And I actually, when I went to bed, I don't know if I was like overdosing or what the deal was, but I had this crazy moment where everything about me just kind of like relaxed. I stopped crying, and I felt this great sense of peace. And I heard an audible voice. Now, some people call this psychosis, but I like to call this God. And it said to me, there's a thunderstorm coming through, and you're going to be drug tested tomorrow. But if you flush everything that you have and don't touch it again, I promise I'll carry you through this. And I went to sleep. And then the next day, my boss called me, and she was like, need you to come into the office. And I knew that it was my day off, and I was like, okay, I think I know what's going down. So I picked up the phone, and I thought, there's no way I can let them know the truth about me before my mom knows what's going on with me, because I owed her everything, And so I picked up the phone, and I told my mom, I was like, Mom, I think I'm getting ready to be drug tested, and I just wanted to call you before I go in because I'm about 99.9% sure that I'm going to fail. And she was like, oh gosh, well sis, what are you going to fail for? I'm like, a lot. I'm not sure, but there's some good stuff in there. She's like what? And I'm like, well, there's probably cocaine in there, and a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And she's like, oh my gosh. And I just knew that she was going to be like, rah! I've tried to protect you. Like, I've done so much to help you. How did you get to this point? And she did something completely different. She looked at me and she was like, or she told me, sis, I love you. And I'm sorry that you're going to go through this, but if you need anything, let me know.
Wow. Whoa.
I was like, and this weight.
Relief.
Yeah. I surrendered.
That was it right there at
moment
that
of clarity.
That point. And then you ended up, by a miracle, getting to the Caron Treatment Center. And this was almost 6 years ago. And did you still believe that you were an alcoholic? Or did you believe
I didn't think I was a drug addict. But I didn't pick up. I didn't go to Caron until a week after that happened.
Right.
And then, TMZ reported that I might lose my crown. And by the end of the night, it was on Sports Center, and we had this huge press conference, and Donald Trump was like, I think she's an alcoholic and needs treatment. And I was like, well, I think that's pushing the envelope a little bit. Like, nationally said that. I think Dr. Drew threw that in my face like about a year ago. I was like, did I really say that? But I was open.
Right.
And I just kept an open mind. And for some reason, every little bit that I let out about what was going on, it just took a little bit more pressure off, and a little more pressure off, and a little more pressure off. And I was willing to accept whatever was to happen. And if they wanted me to go to treatment, I was like, fair enough. I've been a pain in your side. I get it. I surrender. I'm done. Whatever you want, And so about a week into Caron, I identified.
Okay, that's not bad. Not
Not bad.
Week. Yeah.
It took me a week. And I think it was because I was like, I Miss U.S.A. Like, how can I be a drug addict? Like, I have a driver. I have a stylist. I walk red carpet events. Everyone knows who I am. I'm not an addict. Come on, that's the old man that lives underneath the bridge with the plastic bag or the paper bag around his beer, But I related to everyone's emotions and their feelings and their stories. And my bottom was more of an emotional bottom. Some would say that was a really hard bottom, but I didn't lose anything. Nothing was taken away from me except my dignity.
Now see, I'm going to tell you something here that I was that one who did lived underneath the bridge, you know, and something that you really need to know is that you may be saying, well, I didn't go down to Skid Row. Yes, you did.
In my mind, I was
Skid
there.
Row is a state of mind. I don't care if you're living at Donald Trump's plaza,
right?
Because the same thing's going on in between those two ears, whether you're living under a bridge or whether you're living in the mansion.
And I believe that. I 100% believe that because, and I realized that, while I was in treatment, I was like, I haven't been thrown out of bars and my face isn't scratched up and I haven't lost everything, but emotionally, I'm bankrupt. Spiritually, I'm bankrupt. I have nothing. I have no idea who I am. I have no idea what I believe in, and I have no idea who I really love and who really loves me.
What about today? Can you answer those questions?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. My grammar still sucks sometimes, and my accent comes out. I was just with my mom for a couple of days in Ohio, so it's there.
Yeah.
But, I can... There's a freedom that comes to you when all of your skeletons and added skeletons that you don't have come out, and they're splashed everywhere. So everyone has an opinion or they think they know exactly who you are, but it's like, what else you got? You know what I mean? Like, yes, I did that. What else?
Right.
And so I don't live to please people anymore. I don't live to fit in with anyone anymore. I want peace of mind. That's it.
That's all we want. That's all we wanted when we were using was peace of mind.
Right. But I have tools to get it now.
There you go.
And in the beginning of my first couple of years, I would get 5 minutes here and there of just serenity. I'd be like, God, there it is,
Drink it up.
But then I would start spinning out about the future or the past or something. But, the more work that I did and the more I did, service work and really dug into a program, I just, I uncovered, discovered, and discarded, I just got rid of it.
Let me tell you what you've done, and you're probably not even aware of it, because you were so brave and took this public approach to your dilemma, as well as to what you've done for 12-step programs, as well as the Caron treatment centers, you've saved people's lives. Think of the young ladies out there who identified with you, and you got in the way of their addiction, and they're okay now. That's a tremendous role you play in society, a much bigger role than you'll ever play as Miss U.S.A.
Oh, absolutely. And I always felt like, okay, I'm going through this for something. When I was in it, I was like, okay, something good has to come of this. I don't know what it is. I don't know what I'm going to get from it, but something good has to come of it. And, when I go and I share my story with people, I just go because someone asked me to be there, and I'm just honest, and I just give it to whoever it is, how it is, and I'm like, this is what it looked like, and life is great now. I just can't stress enough how great my life is and how happy I am and how great my relationships are, and I get to live out my dreams and do crazy fun things, and I'm okay with saying I'm in a bowling league, and I have my own bowling ball, and I love to play golf, and sometimes I'm extremely boring, but... I get emails from women or mothers or just family members that say, I heard you share at blank, 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 or wherever it was. And if you can speak so honestly about your past and carry no shame about it, then I don't have to have shame about my personal events
the
or
shame
life
issues,
events.
that's what gets us drunk again.
Yeah. And there's no shame in my game. And I kind of have this new catchphrase. I'm like, all right, if my new role or if my purpose in life is to air my dirty laundry in order to help someone out, so be it. Bring it on.
Beautiful. That is absolutely wonderful. You're a wonderful person. We are indeed honored that you've been here.
Oh, thank you.
And we hope to keep up with you and that you'll come back.
Yeah,
too.
of course. I'd love to.
Tara Connor, you are very, very special. Thank you for being here on Trudge the Road. We cannot express our gratitude enough. Hey, speaking of gratitude, let's throw some to the Caron Treatment Centers, a nonprofit leading provider of drug and alcohol addiction treatment, specializing in men's and women's services as well as young adult males and females, and a relapse and outpatient programs. If you're concerned about yourself, pick up that phone. If you're concerned about a loved one, do the same thing. It's 800-854-6023, or the website is caron.org. That's CARON.org. My name is Jerry. I'm a sober alcoholic, and this is Trudge the Road on the Trudge the Road Radio Network.
You've been listening to Trudge the Road. For past episodes, go to our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/Trudge the Road Radio. Join us next week on this great radio station on the Trudge the Road Radio Network.